All good, all good.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing? Everything good?
Hi. Hey, Cynthia. I'm
Hi,
unfortunately,
how are you?
I'm not good. I'm good. I'm not going to be able to stay for the whole meeting. So just wanted to give you a heads up.
No worries. I appreciate you coming on.
Cesar, I called you today. I will not be able to make it on Thursday night.
I got your message. Thank you for that. And I'll circle back with you if anything comes up that you need to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cynthia, it's 6 p.m. I'm going to start the webinar and we should see attendees start to populate. And whenever you're ready to begin, I'll call roll.
Okay, we'll just give it a minute or two and then we'll start.
Yep. We had a lot of people reserved, so you might want to give it a couple of minutes.
Hello, hello. How's everyone doing?
Close the door. Chat, come in.
Can everyone hear us?
We can hear you.
We
Can
can
hear
hear
you.
you.
We can hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
How's everyone doing today?
Everyone's well. How are you?
Good, good, good.
Good to see everyone.
Yes, it is. Does everybody know who I am, or do I need to introduce myself?
You'll be introducing yourself shortly. We're going to start in about one more minute.
Okay.
We're going to go live. I will introduce you and the agenda, then you could introduce the officers that are with you. How does that sound?
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Captain. Jeremy, we'll start in about 30 more seconds. Okay, Jeremy, we could start. Welcome everyone to the Public Safety Committee meeting for March. We're very happy that we have our guest today. We have Captain Castro. We were going to start by taking attendance, and then we'll start the meeting with the agenda items. Jeremy?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I am going to mute everyone now. And when I call your name, please unmute yourself, acknowledge your name, and then mute yourself again. I am only going to call committee members. If you were a board member but not a committee member, I'm not going to call your name, but I will write your name down. So let's start with Cynthia Felix.
Present.
Thank you. Anthony Gilio. Ramon Acevedo. Mohammed Bahi. Joan Body.
Here.
Thank you. Danielle Lai. Kin Fung. John Garcia. Hector Gonzalez.
Here.
Thank you. Zachary Jacy.
Here.
Thank you. John Johnston.
Here.
Thank you. Barbara Lee. Jimmy Lee.
Present.
Thank you. Roll has been called.
Thank you. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge our board chair, Cesar Suniga. I know he has to go. And Cesar, is there anything you would like to share? I know there's been some concerns that residents have brought up. We're very grateful that the 7-2 is here. But I know you may not be here for the entire presentation. So if there's anything that you would like to share, I would like to give you the floor first.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And yes, first of all, thank you for staying on top of this. I think the only thing that I want to say tonight is I hope that we can have a productive conversation. I hope that we can listen to each other. You know, I think unfortunately public safety has gotten politicized, and it's gotten politicized in a way that is really unfortunate, right? Because we've taken such a complex issue and we've reduced it down to slogans. And I think, you know, what we've seen and what I've heard from our neighbors is that people are rightly feeling unsafe, and that's a real thing. And so I think we have an opportunity to come together as a community to have a conversation with the 7-2 about what people are concerned about in this community. And in addition to that, I think that's in part of this conversation also has to be, you know, how do we create a more equitable society by really looking into police community relationships? How do we think about reforming policing? But that's not mutually exclusive from taking very seriously people's perceptions and concerns about public safety. So again, I really just want us to have a conversation, to be able to respect each other's perspectives, and to this is a space for us to talk about how our lived experiences are affecting our quality of life through, again, in this case, the issue of public safety. So Cynthia, again, thank you so much for doing this. And I hope you guys have a really productive conversation.
Thank you. And thank you for setting that tone. I do want to reiterate that this is a respectful forum. We're open to hear everyone's ideas and thoughts and questions. And we're very happy and grateful for the 72nd Precinct to be with us today. I'm going to introduce Captain Castro. He will then introduce the officers that are with him today. And then we will go by the agenda items one by one. And then we will open it up the floor for any questions or comments from any of the attendees in the community, and of course, from any of the board members. So Captain Castro, welcome.
Good afternoon. Just an update. As of December 21st, 2021, I have been promoted to the rank of Deputy Inspector Castro. So my rank went up. Here with me today is my Special Operations Lieutenant, Lieutenant Douglas Shack, and my Community Affairs Officer, Officer Fernandez. I've also, I don't know if she logged on, but I've also asked Assistant Bureau Chief from the District Attorney's Office to be on, Sarah Cutsberg. So I don't know if she's logged on already, but if she hasn't, she will be logging on soon.
I'm here, Captain.
Oh, okay. That's all we have, Cindy, as far as.
Thank you. So we're going to start with the items on the agenda. There's been quite a few concerns, Deputy Inspector, from the community, concerns about infestation of drugs, some spikes in crime. So I'm just going to go over the agenda items and have you speak on them one by one, and then we'll open it up for questions. So some residents from 24th and 25th Street on 4th Avenue have many concerns about what they seem is an infestation of drugs and drug use on that block. Is there anything that you have noticed or any complaints that have come through?
So as far as 24th Street, 25th Street, we know we have the shelter at that location on 4th Avenue on the west side of the street. We have seen and we have received complaints which have been directed to my neighborhood coordination officers to address. As far as the drugs, marijuana is at this time legal. So what we have been seeing is the marijuana use, which we cannot take any type of legal action unless it's in an area which is prohibited smoking. So the area of 24th Street, we know they've been loitering there as far as sitting around the area, spending much of their time in the area. I've driven around that area now, I think with the Dunkin' Donuts new construction and the fact that they have the wooden wall there, I haven't seen too much activity as far as them just standing around the area. Again, if they're standing around and they're not committing any type of crime by, bothering the neighbors or aggressive panhandling, other than us asking them to move off the corner, there's no real crime being committed if they're just standing there. Loitering is not a crime that we can enforce anymore unless it's aggressive panhandling or there's some type of other harassment or any other crime being committed at the time. And harassment itself has to be observed by the officers at that time, at the time it's being committed. So I have in the past communicated with the Department of Homeland Services regarding, the ins and outs of the shelter itself. They're basically free to come and go as much as they please. But as far as anything else in that area, I have not seen, any type of spike in crime itself in the area. So, but Officer McGrath and Officer Gainey, if they see anything, they address it immediately. Anything that we can address, and they have open conversations with the individuals that are in the area. So.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go, what I'm going to do is go through all the agenda items, then open it up for questions rather than one agenda item and then questions. I think that might be easier. So there has also been some concerns about spiking crime within the 72nd precinct sectors. We did get the comp stats. Thank you for providing that. But what are some of the plans that the 72 is doing to address the spike in crimes that we have seen in the neighborhood?
So as far as my crime fighting strategy, which is it's a multifaceted crime fighting strategy, first and foremost, we're always looking to prevent and deter crime. How do we do that? Basically, police presence. We use after 8 p.m. at night until 5 or 6 in the morning when the cops are doing directed patrols. In certain areas, we use our turret lights to do a false multiplier, which means the lights project that there's more police activity in the area. We answer the 311 calls as quickly and as effectively as we can. That's part of deterrence. We do stay in tune with the parole officers and the probation officers to kind of gauge, is this individual on parole? Is this individual committing crimes in our area? If there's anything they can do about it, they will assist us. I know as of March 1st, they are not violating parolees anymore. And that's coming from the top. That's not an NYPD issue, that's a parole issue. But we do keep track of our offenders if they're in the neighborhood and if they do commit a crime, we do reach out to the parole officers. We also have a good communication lines with the district attorney's office when we confront individuals who are constantly committing crimes. Why did this go off? Constantly committing crimes. They assist us in the prosecution process. But as we all know, there is a bail reform that limits for certain crimes if bail should be set on that individual. Therefore, there's a lot of individuals, especially in the 7-2 precinct, What I've noticed in the time I've been here is that about 80% of our crimes are committed by residents of the 72nd precinct, people who live within the command. And it makes it a little bit harder that when we do arrest them for let's say a commercial burglary, there is no bail per se that's mandated. So they are not kept in. They come back out and they commit the same crime again. But that's something that if Sarah Cuthbert can speak about, the prosecution process and, what we're looking at as far as bail reform and, how that affects when we do make an arrest, how it affects the prosecutory process, that would help out. Sarah?
Sure. As now Deputy Inspector Castro mentioned, back in 2020, along with some other modifications, there was a bail reform law passed into the state. And basically what it limits on what kind of cases we can ask for bail, not even discretionary. It's mandatory that we cannot ask for bail on what they deem non-violent crimes, of which commercial burglaries fall within that parameter. And for residential burglaries, they actually made a carve out that it has to be in someone's actual residence, that the lobby of a building is not, although would be a burglary, a violent burglary for purposes of sentencing, it is not a violent burglary for purposes of our bail requests. And so, and does not allow for any sort of judicial discretion or the judiciary to take into consideration whether or not that person is potentially a violent person or has a history of violence. They can only consider the case before them. However, we can, in light of a new arrest, go backwards. So if they have an open pending case and they get rearrested on a new case, we can't ask for bail on the new case, but we can, under certain circumstances, take that new case and go backwards and ask for bail to be set on that previous case. But that is all within the discretion of the court and with the discretion of the judges. And most of the judges are not, on cases where it's a commercial burglary, setting that kind of bail.
Thank you for clarifying that. And Deputy Inspector, how many officers do we currently have in the 7-2?
So we currently have 164 officers. Most of them about, I would say right now we have about 50 officers that are below the 2-year mark as far as being within the department. So that's the accurate number that we have right now, about 164 officers.
And the number of officers assigned, just so that everyone understands, is based on what?
It's based on, we have a unit called OMAP who does the analysis, and they actually tell us based on the crime, based on the area, based on the distance, how many officers should be in each command. And then we break that down as to how many officers should be in each, what we call a platoon, would be the midnights, which is 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., then 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and then 3 p.m. to 11. So each platoon has a designated number of officers per platoon. So an example is the first platoon, which we consider, even though it's the midnights, it's the platoon with the least population out on the street. That platoon has about 37 officers, whereas the second platoon, which is the 7-3, they have about 41 officers. And then the next platoon would be the 4-12, which is 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. They have about 46 officers. And those are patrol only. We're not counting the neighborhood coordination officers, the domestic violence officers, the community affairs officers, our public safety team. So we have other officers in different functions within the command that operate on different times. So our public safety team, they're shifted depending on where the crime is being committed, and their tours are shifted depending on when the crime is being committed.
Okay, thank you for that. And you mentioned it briefly. We know we spoke about the crimes that were, or the infestation of drugs on 4th Avenue near the shelter. There has been some resident concerns that recently came up when we had a meeting regarding homeless shelters that were opening up in Community District 7. Community Board 7 rather. So there were some concerns on the quality of life complaints adjacent to the homeless shelters. Are there any statistics on that, on the homeless shelters and the number of complaints that are stemming from the homeless shelters?
Other than the 311 calls that we get, I would have to tell you that I have not seen, other than the, we have the 49th Street shelter, which is the one that we're getting the most complaints from, and it's inside the shelter itself. 25th Street, we get some 311 complaints, not to the extent to become a chronic location. And then the other shelters, I have not seen an enormous amount of complaints. Usually we'll get a 911 call if there's a crime being committed inside the shelter. But 49th Street shelter, 24749 9th Street is the shelter where we're seeing the most activity as far as crime and crimes being called from within the shelter.
Okay. Also, we spoke a little bit about drug use on 4th Avenue. There also been some concerns about heroin use activities on 5th Avenue, particularly in the high 50s, 58th, 59th, near 6th Street, near OLPH.
So when it comes to narcotics, and I can't go into what type of enforcement we're doing, but there is activity being done, especially on 58th Street. We've been made aware between 3rd Avenue and 5th Avenue of the activity in that area. So we have been doing some enforcement in that area. With heroin itself, we would have to catch them live doing the heroin. And that's another issue. We've arrested some individuals here with crack pipes and what we believe to be crack pipe residue within. That is something that's also being funneled or kind of sorting deferred prosecution on, if that's the only charge. Like I said, marijuana is a legal drug. So even if they had a quantity of, I believe it's less than a pound, it's not enforceable. It's considered for private use. But we have been doing some operations in the area. I just can't get into it because it's our narcotics teams that are the ones addressing. You may not see it, but we've had some arrests come through the store that I'm very much well aware of.
Okay, thank you for that. And now we're going to move on to some complaints that have stemmed about illegal parking, traffic, and driver misconduct that are submitted to 311. A question came up at the December public safety meeting when the XO captain joined us regarding those 311 complaints and what has been the response rate from the 7-2 precinct. Are there any data that you could share with us on what have been the amount of 311 complaints about the illegal parking, traffic, driver misconduct, and the response rate from the 7-2 to these complaints?
All right, give me a second. Let me pull up my data here as far as any type of calls regarding, I know we get a lot of calls, 205 to 6th Street. The NCOs have been doing some work in the area. Anytime it's double parking, if the car is double parked when we get there, there is a summons issue. As far as the quantity of summonses that we've issued, I don't have that data in front of me at this time. I'm trying to pull up here. This computer's running a little slow. Let me, my 301s. And by the way, we have a new XO, Captain Sang. He's coming in right now, but he's on new XO. Come in. This is Captain Sang. Introduce yourself.
I know it's Captain Sam, XO of the F2.
I'm trying to pull up this the 311s. If you could give me a minute, I'll pull it up.
Not an issue. I know they shared there were some challenges regarding illegal parking and abandoned vehicles, particularly under the Gowanus Expressway. And some leeway has been done. I know John DeLuper, one of our board members, did comment that he has seen some difference, but that there is still some abandoned vehicles there, and that it had a lot to do with the towing situation and the fact there's only one tow truck on rotation.
So we use well, what the police department uses is called road tow. And right now, our road tow company is DreamWorks. What happens is, it's not specifically the tow truck, but it's the storage process. So when they take the vehicles to the storage area on 3rd Avenue, if those cars are not picked up, then it becomes a storage problem where they can't pick up more cars because they don't have no place to put them. But they're willing and able to come and pick up any car that we call them on. But if they don't have the storage, they can't put the car in the storage, they can't pick up the car. And they're the only ones that are authorized at this time to pick up any vehicles that we have road tow. So we have department tow, which is basically for evidence purposes. And then we have road tow, which is any other type of vehicle that's out on the street that's either abandoned, that we can qualify as abandoned. That would be the tow company that would pick up those vehicles. We would not necessarily use the department tow trucks to do that service. Traffic themselves, the traffic unit uses the regular, their tow trucks to move any illegal parked vehicles that can be summoned for illegal parking.
And I have a question. Can you clarify? So I know that some complaints were submitted to 311 about abandoned vehicles, for example, and then they were just deemed closed without any action taken. So can you define what is an abandoned vehicle? What is the difference between you tagging it and sanitation tagging it, just so that everyone is aware of what that process looks like?
So an abandoned vehicle is a vehicle, no plates, no VIN numbers. That is considered an abandoned vehicle. If it has a VIN number, we will try to run the VIN number and see if it comes back to a registered owner. If it does, then technically it's legally, as long as it's legally parked on the street, we cannot take action on that vehicle. And if it does not have plates, we cannot summons the vehicle itself. So if it's legally parked, let's say the sign says 9:30 to 11:30 and it's 12 noon and it's legally parked there, we cannot take action on that vehicle. Sanitation takes abandoned vehicles. The vehicle must be derelict in nature. In other words, no engine, missing doors, no VIN number, no plates. It has to seem like the vehicle is trash itself in order for us to take the vehicle. When we look underneath the Gowanus, most of the help we've gotten underneath the Gowanus itself, I would have to tell you, especially in the upper 50s, is the new meter system that they have there. In the lower 30s, we don't have that system. So they're pretty much going based on the street cleaning rules, which I believe are Saturdays only. I believe it's 8:30 to 9. As long as those RVs and those vehicles are moved during that time, they can move out and then move back in. And legally, we cannot take any legal action from the police department's perspective. And that's been something that I've spoken to Jeremy about. Because I did look into it with our legal bureau, and they said if those RVs are there and they're legally parked, we cannot take action against the RVs themselves. And the same thing with the derelict vehicles. Anything that we deem derelict in the sense of abandoned, we're gonna have road tow pick it up. But sanitation has their different rules. If they see it as, it has to be totally in a shell, as we would say, in order for them to take it.
So for example, on my block, there's a car that's parked legally, but illegally because it's a meter. They have gotten about 50, 60 tickets easily. 311 closed it. So wouldn't that be considered an abandoned vehicle at this point? If it's been there over 2 or 3 months and have gotten, the tickets are all on the window, but they're still there. It has plates.
Well, we would have to see if the plates have been suspended based on those summonses. But if it has plates and it's legally parked there, we should not issue 50, 60 summonses. I will tell you, it should be a maximum of 3 summonses issued. But if you give me that plate number and we'll go check it out to see what the situation with that car is. But remember, that belongs to someone, regardless of what we're seeing visually. If it has plates and somebody says that is my vehicle, we have to honor that is their vehicle. No, I need the one that shows the illegal car vehicles. You know, the one that gives us the breakdown. This is the one I have. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get on.
No worries. And someone had a question. Suppose it's parked on a gray area, not a street, but posted signage if parking is, but no signage says whether parking is permitted or not. They're just parking.
If there's no signage delineating the parking terms as far as that area, we are not authorized to issue any type of summons to that vehicle or do anything to the vehicle. The signage is very important for us. Remember, we are guided by legislature. We cannot take action just because we feel that the car is illegally parked. Example, I had someone write me a letter about the new electric charging station on Fifth Avenue, and I believe it's the 40s. There's regular engine vehicles parking in that location. The sign really doesn't say that a regular gas vehicle cannot park there. It just says that it's a charging station. That's something that DOT would have to come, put up a sign, say, only electric vehicles can be standing here during the charging process for us to be able to take enforcement on that in that area. If not, we're not authorized to take enforcement in that area.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing we want to talk about before we open it up for comments is that there has been a spike in subway crime. And particularly some of the residents have seen individuals using drugs, again, heroin, crack pipes on the train stations, on 60th Street, and most recently, the sexual assault that happened at the 45th Street train station. What are some of the measures that the 7-2 is doing to provide us safety passages to the train stations and subways in the neighborhood?
So, as far as the assault actually happened outside transit, even though the victim was followed from within transit. It happened outside transit. But one of the things as a department, so this is not just a 7-2 procedure, this is a departmental procedure. We have transit districts. So Transit District 34 oversees 59th Street, 59th Street, 53rd Street, and 36th Street stations. So they have their transit officers in that area. We have Transit District 32, and we have Transit District 30. Those all have their own commanding officers, and they are specifically addressing crime inside the transit areas. What we're doing at the patrol, from the patrol, or we say top side, is we're assigning officers from patrol to do directed patrol inside transit based on what activity we're seeing or what crimes we're taking within the transit district. So for this week, we have 2 officers assigned to the 59th Street and 4th Avenue station from patrol. They spend their entire tour on the platform, walking up and down the platform, reading the trains as they come in order to prevent and deter crime. We also have officers assigned to 25th Street and 4th. That's more of a 3-hour to 4-hour window for the commute time. We have them assigned there, but they are moved depending on the day of the week and the time of the week they are moved. But throughout the tour, patrol is designated to go into the transit areas and do what we will call transit checks. As a department, they've raised the bar even more. Now we have chiefs, deputy chiefs, doing transit checks. They are riding the trains for an 8-hour period, up and down the train station with officers, checking on each of the train stations within the affected areas. So there's areas that have been affected as far as the crime, spikes in crimes, and they also patrol the transit areas. So there is a strong effort coming from the mayor's office, the police commissioner, to stop the influx and the spike in crime within the transit system. Also offering our homeless constituents shelter. We just had a cleanup on Prospect Park and 4th. On Saturday, I was present there. We offered them shelter. They refused shelter. They refused any services from the Department of Homeless Services, but we were able to clean up the area because they were somewhat in an encampment structure, and that is against the law in New York City. So we are paying attention to the transit areas, and we're well aware of what's going on in transit. So I continuously confer with the commanding officers of Transit District 34, Transit District 30, and 32 on a continuous basis as far as our deployment.
And in terms of any update that you could give us on the sexual assault incident that occurred on February 26th?
So that I had spoken to Jeremy because he did reach out to me. We do have a suspect. We did drop probable cause, which is basically we're on the search for him. What we do know is that he is not in New York City anymore. So it's in the process of the courts. I can't get into details as far as the crime itself, but we do know we did get a fingerprint lift from the crime scene, which gave us the probable cause I-card. So we are on the search for that perpetrator.
And in terms of just safety, that some precautions people could take, what is some of the 3 best things that you could tell them? I'm going to work 6 in the morning, I should feel safe. What are some things that I could take as a precaution?
A precaution, I would say be very vigilant, especially in the train stations, right? Try to ride the middle of the train, not the ends of the train, where it would leave you at the end of the platform, giving you more of a walk through the entire platform, especially in the middle of the night if you're traveling. Look back when you're going up the staircase from the transit system up to the street. Look back, look around you. If you feel that someone is watching you or following you, in this case, this individual followed the young lady, hey, stop, pick up the phone, call 911. We will respond to the location, even if, that person seems to create fear in you. We can always stop the person and question them, especially in this instance where, it's a lonely street and it's quite obvious that he's following the victim. So the main thing is vigilancy. One of the biggest issues that I've noticed in Sunset Park is the lack of lighting, especially in between the streets. That's something that I discussed with Councilmember Menchaca in the past when he was the council member here, which I also am going to be speaking to Councilmember Aviles about, trying to see if we can get more lighting in the streets, because that's something that's also affecting us when it comes to crime, is the lack of lighting. We had discussions in Sunset Park and we were able to get the lighting fixed inside the park by the Department of Transportation, which actually owns the lighting. But I would tell you, hey, if you're coming home every day at the same time, late in the night, carry a flashlight with you. Turn that flashlight on. Look before you go down the block that you normally go down. And if there's anything that looks suspicious, by all means, dial 911, and we will go over there and investigate. Even if it doesn't add up to an arrest or anything, because a crime wasn't committed, we can always investigate based on, the fear that the person felt or any action that that individual may have done, to the person.
Okay, and before we move on, were you able to find the 311 statistics?
This is the breakdown of the number of calls. Okay. All right, so the number of calls we've had, and we go on a 28-day cycle, right? So abandoned vehicles, 63, animal abuse, 7, blocked driveway, 246, drinking, 3, drugs, 1, encampments, 37, graffiti, 1, illegal parking, 539, noise commercial, 97, house of worship, 1, park, 7, residential noise, 109, sidewalk street noise, 72, noise vehicle, 49, non-emergency police matter, 8, panhandling, 4, traffic condition, 7, and urinating in public, 3. So overall, for the period, we had 1,254 311 calls for the period of February 14th to March 20th. Based on the analysis that we've done, most of the blocked driveways, we've addressed it by issuing a summons once we issue the summons, the homeowner has a right to call a private tow company to actually tow the vehicle, but they will not tow without a summons from the New York City Police Department. And then the illegal parking, most of it, from what I've seen, is hydrants, which if the officer gets there and the vehicle is parked there, we will issue a summons.
Okay, thank you. I will ask you to send that to me so we could include it in the report because I can catch all the statistics one by one.
Absolutely.
But thank you for that update. So I know we have a lot of attendees and our board members that have questions. So I am going to open it up to them to ask any questions that they may have of you while we have you and the office is on. Jeremy, would you like me to call?
It's entirely up to you, but I will just invite panelists and attendees to raise hands now. And so far, I just see one hand up. I see a couple now. Would you like me to call or would you
Yes,
like?
please. Thank
Okay,
you.
so, no problem. So I have Catherine Walsh first.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the point being made. So 2 parts on the complaints that are filed to 311 that NYPD responds to. The meeting that Cynthia is talking about from December is folks specifically, like there were several dozen people who joined that call in December who talked about their own experience of calling into the 72nd, like the 63, the 247, the 539, like, you know, on these different issues. But that then their experience is that the case would be closed, they get the closed ticket and the issue didn't change. And like, you know, they would follow up and it would say 311 investigated this. And the city council actually in October of this last year did their own investigation of the NYPD response to 311, where they actually had filed about 50 and found that, you know, in 14 of those instances, NYPD had said that they'd responded and they actually hadn't. And so then there was a testimony, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. So I think the numbers I'm really interested in is really looking at like what has been responded to, and do you have, you know, data and evidence that, you know, in the 72nd that you do respond to all of those that you say you do? Like, do you have, you know, proof, you know, and like there's actually accountability there, because it is something that has been found around some fraudulence in terms of reporting and saying they're showing up. That's the first one on like 311 and like the 72nd, and understanding like your accountability to responding. And then the second one goes back to the beginning of the conversation around safety. Today, the city comptroller, who's like the watchdog, you know, to make sure around accountability and transparency, released and really looked at the data and found that folks, you know, who like you talked a bit about folks recommitting crimes, but this looked at all of the city records and found that folks, you know, who were rearrested on pretrial release, it was lower than 2 years before bail reform. So I'm really interested, you're saying like, we know in the 72nd, you know, this is what's happening, like where I'm really interested in that data and that evidence, because I'm hearing this kind of, you know, claim, but I don't know, like, can you show us that that's actually what's happening? Because the city comptroller report that just came out, that like, you're saying 2 different things, but I can see their data. I just don't know the data that you're referring to for the 72nd. So I'd love to hear your responses to both of those to provide greater transparency and accountability.
So as far as the 72nd precinct, our transparency is, and our work ethic is to respond to every job. We have an integrity control officer who actually, if we get a complaint, 311, and we answer it out, and then the person sends a message back saying officers did not address this, there is an internal investigation that is done. And we hold our officers accountable if they were supposed to go to a location and address a condition. I just want to make very clear, the officer has the discretion based on what they're seeing to take enforcement or not. It's not necessarily true that every time we go to a, let's say, an illegally parked car, that we're going to issue a summons just because we want the summons issued. First, we have to see the vehicle illegally parked. Number 2, as just a community thing, we will run the plate and see if it's somebody that lives in the neighborhood or lives in the area that maybe parked the vehicle. Maybe they're dropping off their child. We always try to do the right thing for the right reason. But if not, we do issue the summons. I have seen and we review the 311 calls, especially illegally parked cars, or even if we go to urination in public and we catch that person. Remember, we have to see the crime. So if we see the crime, we do hold the person accountable. So as far as illegally parked vehicles, we have issued the summonses. I've seen it. If there is a complaint that one of our officers did not respond to the job and there's evidence that they did not, they are held accountable. Everyone is held accountable, including myself, for anything that the NYPD has put out as a process or procedure, and we do not follow through. So I'm very confident. We have a 45-minute response time to all 311 calls. So that call has to be responded to, has to be addressed. If it's an anonymous call, it makes it a little bit harder, especially if it's something of a criminal nature, because we have to have that person come out and point the individual to us. But if it's something as an illegally parked car and we can solve it without doing enforcement, we're gonna attempt to do that. If it's a person with a confirmed number, we will reach out to that person if we're unclear of what the situation is. Our officers are required to reach out to that person, and they're required to speak to that person and meet with that person and say, okay, what's the issue? What's going on here? Why, if it's a, let's say, noise complaint, where's the noise coming from? What's the decibel of the noise? And then that person would give us the direction of where we need to go to address that situation. So that as far as 311, we do have, a processes in place to verify that our officers are doing their job, they're responding. If it's a chronic location, our neighborhood coordination officers address chronic locations. That is more than two calls within a given period. We have the neighborhood coordination officers address that condition. And we do 5 or more calls, make them to the point where now it becomes a neighborhood coordination job, which they have to respond. I have my supervisors must respond to 2 or more calls at the same location and on that given period. So if we see 2, 3, 4, 5 calls for noise complaint party, not only does the unit have to respond, but the supervisor has to respond to the location and rectify the situation. Again, it may be enforcement, it may not be enforcement. It may just be speaking to, I have a location here, a bar that's one of my chronic locations. We'll go over there, we'll check the sound. If the sound is within the guidelines of the New York City ordinance, we cannot take a legal action on that. Any type of legal action on it.
So what I hear you saying is that in the 72nd precinct, this issue that is found more broadly with 311 and NYPD and not investigating is not a problem within the 72nd. That's what I'm hearing you say, that it's not happening in our precinct.
No, I did not say that. I've had situations where the person calling has reached out to us and said, hey, the officer did not come. And we do our checks. And if accountability needs to be held, we hold the person accountable, the officer accountable. But I'm very confident that your 72nd precinct officers are responding to the 311 calls because they are mandated to respond. That is not an option. But if there is an anomaly where someone calls us or sends a message back to us and says the officer never showed up or the issue is not rectified, it's an immediate response by the supervisor, and then my integrity control officer does their investigation.
If you have, and if you have those numbers, I think that's helpful because that's what people said. They said that was their experience in the 72nd is that 311 calls are being closed and saying they're being addressed and they're not. So if you guys have those numbers, it's one thing to say this is what's coming in from 311 and another to say like, this is what's been closed, but it's like this gap and understanding what that is. So I know others have other questions.
When you say numbers, those numbers are based on the feedback we get from the 311 caller. So if we're not getting feedback, if you're not calling us up or sending a message through the 311 system saying the officer did not.
We are, yeah. And that's what Cynthia's referring to from December is that this meeting was much broader with lots of community people and people saying like, we call it, we have a record, it says it was closed, nothing, change? Do they follow up? Again, I don't want to repeat the December meeting, but that's what that was in reference to. And then again, it was around the time that there was this larger investigation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think what would be helpful, Deputy Inspector, of the 1254, for example, that you just said that you got in a 28-day period, how many of those were closed? What was the response? Things like that. I think that's what a more granular data to just say, okay, so we got 1,254 calls. Of those, 1,200 were closed within the 45 minutes. And we did take additional action on 539, which were illegal parking, 246 with driveways, we issued summons. I think that's the granular data that people were asking for, because some participants in that particular meeting were saying that they called 311, an officer came and closed the case and no action was taken, or no officer ever showed up and they looked back and said, hey, my case is closed, but nothing happened.
And I understand, if that situation happens, that's the type of feedback we need immediately from the person who called. If my
Understood.
officers get there, I am going to assert, they are not mandated to take enforcement action just because you believe, or someone believes that enforcement action should be taken. We have to go by the letter of the law. So we may see something that you may think it's a crime, but under the letter of the law, it's not a crime. We cannot take action. And like I said, in most cases, when we look at illegally parked cars, we should be doing an investigation. We do not want to hit somebody supposedly being illegally parked who's dropping off their child at school or who's picking up their child from the babysitter. We're not going to issue them a summons, if they did it for a cause. So we always try to do the right thing. But anytime my officers do not respond to a 311 call, I want to know about it. I expect someone to reach out, and I've had it happen where they've reached out to me, and I immediately put my integrity control officer to do an investigation, because it is unacceptable for us. That is not our standard. Our standard is to respond to every 311 call.
Thank you for that.
I have John DeLuper next.
All right. Thank you. And thank you guys for coming to this meeting. It's really important to hear your perspective, and I appreciate the updates. I did want to follow up on a couple things. Cynthia alluded to it early in the meeting, but some of the abandoned vehicles we mentioned at the last meeting are still there. You were able to get a bunch, so I appreciate that. But the ones on 62nd Street, I would like to ask if you guys can take a second look. They're on a median, and I know at least one of them has been there for over a year. So it's definitely something that if you can get that taken care of would be really great. Another thing is following up on the 311 agenda item. I've kind of experienced some of the stuff that Katie mentioned, especially because when I've called 311 about issues in the last several months, I've sometimes gotten calls from officers. In the past, they'd give a call, they'd ask a clarifying question. Oh, is the issue on this corner, on that corner? But lately I've gotten officers tell me not to put in 311 calls. They've said, oh, that's an issue that you should only deal with your agenda, your neighborhood correction officer, that we wait till we get enough complaints from them. We don't like 311 calls. Or they've called and said that, like, if it's a repeat offender or problematic business, that that the owner is cool, and that they're such a nice guy, and why don't you go in and tell the owner yourself not to do what they're doing, because surely they'll listen to you. They're always great to us. And the thing is that you guys have, badges and authority. So when you tell them that, like, yeah, they listen to you. But if I tell them, I've gotten yelled at by owners for saying stuff like that. So having this kind of response from the officers, it's not great. And it kind of leads to some of those situations where I know you guys talk about how you're trying to build trust. But if they call and say, oh, it's not a problem, or the owner is a great guy, they work hard. And one other thing on that note is there is a repeat offender that I've had that I've called in a couple times, and I've had officers call me and tell me that they call the owner and tell them to move. And this was really disappointed because, okay, the person parks illegally, not such a problem, but the person was dangerous. They had like hundreds of citations. They They never have the front plate on, the tinted windows, all these things. And we mention them in the thing and they go, oh, well, you know, he's a nice guy. We ask him to move and they would almost never ticket it. So I just want to echo that call and ask if you guys can work on maybe, you know, I know you said the officers every time have discretion, but at some point, you know, it has to be, they have to kind of take action on these things so that we can keep, you know, having the high level of trust and communication with you guys that we want to have, and that I'm sure you want to have as well. So that's just my feedback on that, and thank you.
John, if any officer's calling you and telling you to take care of the 311 yourself, please get their badge number and their name, and email me with that information. Again, that is unacceptable to me, and I will not accept that. But I need that information funneled back to me so that I know what's going on. We should take care of the issue. Again, if we could take care of the issue in a civilized way, as far as let's do a mediation. Maybe it's an ongoing issue that we need to mediate. We can facilitate a mediation between yourself and the store owner. We do that at the precinct level. Our neighborhood coordination officers will do mediation. But you should never be referred back to the neighborhood coordination officers, because you're calling too much. That's unacceptable. Please get badge numbers. They are 100% supposed to give you their badge number and their name. If they refuse that, that's a different investigation. Ask for their badge number, their name, officer, you know, and send that over to me, and I will ensure that I look into it and I hold people accountable, because that is our job, is to respond to 311s, 911s, and address the situation and the condition. Absolutely.
All right, cool. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have John Johnston next.
Thank you, Inspector. I really appreciate all the work the 72nd Precinct does and all the police officers do. And I know your hands are tied, and but I do have some questions about general quality of life in the precinct and the borough. I see a lot of people drinking now. I know marijuana is legal, but I can smell it going through the parks in this community. I also see graffiti is everywhere, and you know, graffiti breeds crime. People who do graffiti are criminals, and usually there's another crime behind that. And I'm really concerned as a community board member and as a parent that we're heading back to policing reacting, not acting on the crime, basically from the 1970s. And so my question is, are you able, based on your load, how many open cases do you have that you can't solve? And my question also is that, is the district attorney really helping prosecuting cases in this borough, or are they really pro-criminal? I mean, I take Brad Lander's information with a grain of salt because he is pro-criminal. He supports criminals over citizens. And I think that we need to go back to the broken window theory in broken windows and start solving crimes from the start in this city, because the city is really going the pot, literally. And I think that, you know, we question you and everything is really our elected officials who are at fault here, because they passed laws that make our quality of life worse. But I want to thank you very much. Thank you, Captain Inspector.
Thank you, John. John, we have an auxiliary coordinator by the name of Officer Fulcher. She does regularly do the graffiti cleanups in the neighborhood, but it seems to be that graffiti is more prominent than our cleanups. So it makes it a little bit difficult to catch up. We do reports on every graffiti that we see. If you see a graffiti, please call 911. We will do a report and we will schedule a cleanup. We have made some arrests in the neighborhood for graffiti. We had one a couple of weeks ago in Sunset Park. We caught the person doing graffiti live. So that is of concern to me. I 100% agree that, you know, the aesthetics of the community would look better without the graffiti. And it's something that we're working on, but we welcome the community to help us do the cleanups. We've scheduled I think it was last year, we scheduled a neighborhood cleanup where we use community members to help us clean up the area. So if anyone wants to participate with our cleanups, you're more than welcome. Home Depot is one that does donate paint and paint supplies to us in order for us to do the cleanup. David Estrada participates with us as the bids president. So we're always looking for help. It's not, it's not just all the NYPD. We expect the community to work with us, to notify us when they see a crime being committed as far as graffiti or even any type of quality of life issue. Give us a call, 911. We'll go over there, 311, and we'll address the condition if we see it.
Thank you.
I have Angie Swa next. Angie, you can unmute yourself. Angie? Angie, I see your microphone is unmuted, but I cannot hear you. I see you are now listed both as an attendee and a public member, a panelist. I mean, I don't know how that happened. Angie, I am going to mute you and try this again. Angie, could you try to unmute yourself again? Nope, I don't understand. Unfortunately, we can't hear you. Angie, please put your question or comment in the Q&A and we will read it for you.
Jeremy, you're muted.
Thank you. I don't know how much of that you got. Catherine Walsh is next.
Oh, okay. So just there are two parts. My question, and you talked a little bit earlier about in the beginning of the meeting about crime, and you brought up the fact of evidence and data that you have on the 72nd precinct specifically about folks being released and committing crimes again. And so that's when I cited the New York City-wide report that came out from the comptroller's office again that found that the people being rearrested pre-trial release is lower than 2 years before bail reform. So do you have, you talked about in the 72nd precinct that it's higher. Could you share that data? Is that something that you guys have? You have the data and evidence to support that claim?
So Kathy, what I see every day and the way my officers are arresting individuals, we see them coming through the system. It's a visual check. We know. I don't have the data in front of me.
So it's a visual check, so you don't have data or evidence. Okay, that's helpful. I just wanted to make sure I heard it right.
I have an individual who's committed 7 commercial burglaries and is out ROR on the street. I saw him yesterday. He committed 7 commercial burglaries. We have another individual.
You have an individual case, but you don't have across the board in terms of analysis and data and evidence. You have this personal experience and visuals. Okay, thank you for giving that context.
I'm sorry?
No, it was just if you have data and analysis that shows that for the 72nd, that's what I was looking for. And what you're saying, your data analysis is based on your visuals and your experience, talking anecdotally about this one person. You don't have data and evidence.
It's what we see based on the data that we have in the 72nd precinct. You're going citywide. I'm just talking about the 72nd.
Right. So can you share that insight?
You can request that data if you need it. You can request it just like the city data. But what we're seeing, boots on the ground, when we arrest an individual, and individuals in plural, we are seeing that they're getting out much quicker than the crimes they're committing. And we see this because we track the crimes. We track the arrestees, right? As far as when we arrest them, they come back to the command. I don't have the specific names, but that data is in the system. And the district attorney's office, I have Mr. Watkins here. can speak about that also. But you're speaking about citywide. I'm only speaking about the 72nd precinct, and that data is available to you. If you request it through FOIL, you can get that data.
Okay, yeah, what I was saying, I'm citing something citywide. You talked about the 72nd precinct being not the case. And so I was looking for where is that data and the evidence to show that trend. And you're saying that John Watkins would have that available.
I'm saying you can request it through FOIL and you can get the information just like you got the citywide information. Each command, the information is given as far as the prosecution itself. Again, the fact that they're going in, we are arresting. If I can go through the data here and show that based on what we're seeing, yes, the 72nd precinct is up in crime year to date, 117% in crime. We are also up in arrests. Overall arrest, 15.6%. Overall index crime arrest, which is the 7 index crimes, we're up 56%. So we are making arrests when crimes are committed. We are making arrests. What we are seeing, as I said, at the ground level, is I'm seeing the individuals that we are arresting, and we cluster anytime more than 2 crimes are committed, it creates what we call a pattern. So when we arrest an individual on 7 burglaries, commercial burgs, and then we see the individual out on the street, that dictates to us that there is an issue, and the district attorney's office did clarify that for you at the beginning, Sarah Cuthbert, as far as the bail reform and what the process is at the judicial system. Remember, our job is only to bring people to justice. The prosecutory part and the justice system itself is totally different from what we do.
Yes, of course. My focus was on that rearrest rate because you cited bail reform. And so I'm saying citywide, this rearrest rate was found, pre-bail reform. The numbers are lower, but I heard you in your presentation say the rearrest rate in the 72nd is higher based on your data and your evidence. And so I followed up to say, what is the data and evidence? And your response was based on your personal experience. That's why I was looking for, okay, you're saying 72nd is headed the other direction compared to the city. So specifically on this rearrest issue.
It's what we see based on who we're arresting. We know arrestees.
It's what you see and the way the data on that and the evidence, like that's where I'm trying to go back to data.
I understand.
Not based on personal visuals and experience.
I understand, Ms. Walsh. I understand. And as I said before, it can be requested if you want it. We can furnish that information.
Great. Okay, I'll request it by way of Cynthia, by way of the committee, in the way that we can get some follow-up on this. Thank you very much.
I think Mr. Watkins wants to speak, please.
Yep, I was just about to call him next. John Watkins.
Good evening, everyone. I'm listening very intently. And what I can suggest to the community member who just spoke, if she can send me an email specifically what kind of information that she wants regarding what the DA's office involvement is with these statistics that she's referencing, and I can either myself get that information or work with my colleagues in the DA's office who know that information about the data and be responsive to her to get the information. So I can give my email address if that's all right, and she can send me an email, and I'll follow up on it. It might take a few days, but we'll definitely get it in the pipeline and get some answers for her. And if you're taking notes, that email address is watkinsj@brooklyndA.org. That's WATKINSJ@brooklyndA.org. I'd be happy to look into that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Thank you very much.
And you can always go through the community board as well. We of course have John's contact information.
Thank you.
I'm gonna try Angie Suarez again. Angie, see if you could unmute. Angie? I'm sorry, Angie, we just can't hear you. If you would put your question in the Q&A, I'll be happy to ask it. John, did your hand go up again or nope? Okay, there are a couple of questions, Cynthia. I think people would just like clarification on in the Q&A. Could I read them?
Yes, thank you.
So from Jane Berm, it is often impossible for police to respond to a call in time to witness, for example, public urination, e-bikes on sidewalks, etc. Can police use video taken by 311 callers? What about if the caller sticks around and is able to direct them to the right party?
Well, if they can stick around and be the complainant, we can write the summons based on that complainant's information. We'll put it on the summons that they personally observed the individual committing the violation. That's something that we do on a summons.
And the part about can you use video taken by the 311 callers?
As far as the violation, it has to be personally witnessed by the officer or the person stating, and we have to have them in front of us. If it's a misdemeanor or felony, no problem, but violation is a little bit more different than misdemeanors and felonies.
Thank you. Jody Chufa, forgive me if I butchered your name. Just was seeking clarification. Who should be called when you see graffiti?
You should either 911 if they're actively doing the graffiti, because we want to try to arrest the individuals, or 311 if it's a past graffiti. But I will also furnish you Officer Fulcher, our auxiliary coordinator's number, and you can directly call her if you want a cleanup done in the area, and she'll also do the report at the same time.
Great, thank you. I have Johanna Bjorken. Johanna, you can unmute.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my question. I have a question about going back to the parking and when, if ever, it's allowed to park on a median. I'm not talking about abandoned cars on medians. I'm talking about like parking on medians. If it seems like a very unsafe thing, and I want to know when that's allowed.
Well, it depends on the parking regulations, whatever the sign is. If the sign says you can't park from 8 to 11, then you can't park in that area.
But I'm talking about like on a median, like there are no parking. I don't know. I'm not aware of any parking signs that relate to medians, like the medians on 4th Avenue.
She's talking about I'm sorry, I'm confusing it with the Gowanus, that area, that medium area. You're talking here on the medium on like in front of the precinct, that medium.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep, that should not be for parking, and we will correct that.
And then also similarly, like the area, I forget, I know it's got a name and I don't remember what it is, like the area between the now that there's a protected bike, the bike lane is there, the area between sort of in advance of a turn where it's a no park, the pedestrian sort of wider areas there. And also to help.
Crosswalk, at the crosswalk?
It's not the crosswalk. So like, basically when they put in the bike lanes, there's now like around like 20, like maybe 1 or 2 parking spaces before the intersection that is now like sort of it's shaded and you're not supposed to park there, but cars still park there all the time. And as a cyclist, it's terrifying because it means that I can't see when a car is making a turn and the cars can't see me. And I'm wondering if that's ever allowed. And again,
that area is illegal, but I'm going to have to put in a traffic intel report to DOT because there should be some signage or some writing clearly stating that you cannot park in that area, because I have seen that and it's of concern to us. But it's basically it's a signage issue where someone would not deduce that the shaded area is a non-parking area.
Can I make a request that the 72 models that in front of its own precinct, because especially there's a school there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'd like to address the issue with the no parking areas. I've been asking DOT for months, if not more than a year, to complete the 4th Avenue bike lanes. They have never put in the no parking signs, which makes it a lawless area where you cannot get a summons for parking in a crosswalk, which makes those bike lanes more dangerous because the area that's supposed to be where you see oncoming traffic is now blocked by an illegally parked car that cannot be summoned, car or truck. In addition, DOT finished repaving 4th Avenue in October, but they never put back the flexible delineators. We've been asking them for that for months as well. They're a safety agency. They just seem to ignore the safety in this community. Thank you, Johanna. I appreciate you bringing up that question. Angie did write into the Q&A. She had a statement: since the hotels in the neighborhood started to be used as shelters, I feel unsafe. These new residents are like zombies and they sleep all day and they start coming out at night.
So I believe that most of the hotels in the area, if they are not shelters per se, have discontinued lodging a homeless population in there. I know the one here next to the command on 30th Street is no longer a shelter. So what we're seeing is the one on 25th is half shelter, half hotel, but that's a legal shelter. And most of the other shelters are up and running. But as far as the hotels, they are no longer being utilized from what I'm seeing and what I've heard from DHS as facilities for the homeless population.
I believe, I believe actually just 2 of the hotel shelters have closed. I believe several others are still in use. I'd be happy to connect you with DHS on that.
Absolutely. What I've got from DHS, is that they were discontinuing and they were phasing that out because that was due to the COVID pandemic, that they had rented out some of the rooms in some of these hotels in order to keep the distance.
So I want to invite people to use the Q&A more than raise your hand more than Q&A. The next question, I don't quite understand, but I will ask it. What is the law of homeless encampment?
So the law, as far as homelessness, it's not a crime. The only thing that would be enforceable if they refuse to break down is the structure, and it has to be a full structure with a roof cover. So if we went, like I said, on Saturday, we did a homeless cleanup on Prospect and 4th. There was what we would call an encampment. It had four sides and a roof. We have to ask them first to dismantle the structure itself. If they agree, it's not a summonsable offense. If they refuse, we ask them a second time. If they refuse again, then that would be a summonsable issue, where we would issue a summons and take the structure itself as evidence.
I think what she said, Jeremy, just to add, said that it was cleaned up, but an hour later it came back.
Yeah, it's something that we have to maintain. They have a right to take their property with them. So when we go and ask them if they want to, we had the sanitation truck out. We asked them if they wanted to discard anything. They said no. As long as they move it from the area, what we have to do is continuous maintenance, but we cannot take their property. We cannot, that is their personal property. And as long as they move it when we request it to be moved, that is not a crime. And I know Prospect and 4th, we've done several cleanups in that area. And again, the individual who's there, he basically moves his stuff and then brings it back again. And unfortunately, we cannot take possession and we cannot discard any of his personal property, which is his property. And the only enforcement is if he's occupying the entire sidewalk where there's no pedestrian walkway allowed. And from what we've observed, there is some type of walkway where people can walk up back and forth. But as far as the enforcement aspect, we can't enforce unless it's a structure or he's blocking the entire walkway where he would be impeding people from walking freely.
And I'll just read, Angie also goes on to note that on 29th Street and 3rd Avenue, the corner building is always tagged. The landlord keeps painting over it, but it's continuously being tagged. And that she doesn't feel safe at the 25th Street station. As she says, since the hotels have opened as shelters, there are quality of life issues on 4th Avenue. And she notes she's seen an increase in drugs. I have no additional hands up, Cynthia.
Thank you. I would like to follow up with Deputy Inspector Castro. You mentioned earlier that lighting was an issue. Are there particular areas that we should be concentrating on as a community board that we could advocate? I know you said you met with Councilman Menchaca and Councilmember Menchaca, and you plan to meet with Councilmember Aviles about this, but are there particular areas that we could perhaps advocate as a community board where lighting is an issue? You said you were able to resolve it at a park, but there are particular streets, or can the community weigh in and say, hey, my block is not well lit? I know I live on a block that has a lot of beautiful trees,
Yes.
but the trees obstruct the lights, right?
Yep.
So can we submit names to blocks to you? Do you have particular streets in mind that this has been a concern?
Yes, so the particular streets I have in mind would be 46th Street to 59th Street, from 4th to about 7th Avenue. In my passings at night, during the night, I've driven up and down those areas, and the lighting is very poor. That is also an area where we take most of our robberies because of the poor lighting. And that since day one, I've noticed it, and I'm like, wow, this is not good that there is not sufficient lighting. We also take a lot of larcenies of bikes and larcenies of motorcycles because of the poor lighting in the area. So it would benefit if we would, we could put some more lighting in the area. Overall, that would help because lighting is a deterrent. Prior to getting the Sunset Park lights fixed, we actually furnished light towers. We had 2 light towers, one on 41st and 5th and one on 44th and 5th, which is what we deemed as a corridor that was a problematic area for us. So definitely.
And I know this wasn't on the agenda, but I did notice that the other day I was on 5th Avenue and I did see officers pull over somebody with an e-bike and ask them. I know there's some updates on the regulations for e-bikes. Is that something that you would like to share? Has been a concern that e-bikes are ridden on the sidewalks without helmets, without proper registration, license, etc.
So I'll let my executive officer speak on that. The e-bikes themselves, the legality of the e-bikes.
The e-bike, they have to, most of the e-bike, they don't need to register. So if they are pedal, then, it's not considered e-bike, but if they have a battery or they have gas or propelled, then they are considered as e-bike. But most of that e-bike, they can actually, drive on the bike lane, but they cannot use it on the sidewalk. Those we enforce. If we see them, driving on the sidewalk, we definitely enforce it. And we have a lot of officers enforcing them, taking the red light. They have just like regular bike. They have to obey all the traffic regulations and rules, like stopping a stop sign, stopping on red light, and yelling to pedestrian as well.
Thank you.
Cynthia, I have a couple of more hands up as well.
Okay.
But I'd also, tomorrow, I will be writing a letter to DOT requesting lighting survey within all those areas. And I would invite you and anybody else to use your community board to request lighting surveys of DOT. I have John DeLuper next.
All right. Just want to add one thing to the chorus of voices about lighting. So for Officer Castro, I'd like to ask, in your advocacy, the board has already been working on this, so kudos to Jeremy, Natasha, Maria. But the 60th Street between 3rd and 4th Avenue. One of the streetlights there has been out for about 2 years, and it seems to be having trouble getting fixed. So as you continue to advocate for more lighting, I would hope that that site can stay on your list as well. So that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Sorry, I needed to take a drink. I have Sylvia Seltzer. I have Sylvia Augusto next. Sylvia, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Inspector, Deputy Inspector Castro, and everyone else at the 7-2. Thank you for your service. In regards to the calls that you're getting on 49th Street for the shelter there, what are the calls and how many calls are there? And are there any arrests from the clients that are staying there? That's number one question. In regards to 39th Street and the buses, I had sent a video to the community board and to the 7-2 precinct a couple of weeks ago because it's getting ridiculous on 39th Street at night between, let's say, 8 o'clock at night to 11 o'clock at night. The buses are coming up, they're double parking, and there's literally, we are a two-way street and we're only going one way. It's insane. And the bus drivers don't seem to get it. And I don't understand. They had corrected it for like a week. Saturday, it happened again. I did not go out last night to investigate it. But on Saturday, it was chaos here on this block. And then on 36th Street, we have buses going down and trucks going down 36th Street between 4th and 5th. And this is all the time. And in regards to I'm sorry, so many things. How many cases of rape have we had recently in, let's say, the last 6 months in our community? And how many of them are domestic and how many of them, I don't even know how to word this the right way. So you understand where I'm going with this.
So as far as the data year to date, we've had 6 rapes. All right. Of those 6 rapes, 5 of them are acquaintances, family members, domestic violence. Only one, which is the one on 44th Street, the attempted, was the only one that was a street rape. Every other rape that we've had, even including last year's rapes, were either family or acquaintances, which differ from any type of street rapes.
Okay, and in regards to 49th Street?
So in regards to 49th Street, I could get that data as far as the breakdown of 49th Street, but just based on the reports I've been reading, most of them are assaults. So it's them fighting each other, the homeless individuals, because they're roomed in the same area. Most of them are fights, or the staff members fighting with the members of the homeless shelter. Nothing has been an individual, from just an independent individual. It's just been from inside the shelter itself. As far as the number of assaults in the shelter, I would have to get that information back to you, but it's mostly inside the shelter that's going on. It's either staff member or member to member.
Okay, and the buses on 39th?
The buses, Gerber's going to update because he's been in communication with the MTA. He's going to talk to you right now.
Hey, how you doing, Sylvia? It's Gerber.
Hi.
So I reached out to Mr. Fuchsia from the MTA, and he told me he would have it resolved. He connected me to other supervisors from the MTA, which I wanted them to be a part of this conversation as well. For whatever reason, I don't think they're logged on, but I do see that there has been an improvement, but you're saying that it's starting to come back?
Yes, Saturday was chaos over here. And what my biggest, there's a couple of things. We have the clean right. So they're blocking clean right traffic coming in and out. They're blocking the hotels, the people coming in and out of the hotels. but they're blocking the firehouse stores. It's like insane. It's just, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. And it's all the time now. Before, people used to have the respect to stop before or after the firehouse, even in the daytime. They don't do that anymore. There's no regards to the firehouse. If there's traffic on this block, they cover the whole front of the firehouse. So God forbid, if there's an emergency, we see it all the time. So, and one last thing, I'm sorry. One last thing, in regards to traffic in the community on 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and 6th, and 7th, has it increased in the past couple of years? Is there more accidents in the community? And why do you think that is happening?
My executive officer will speak to you in regard to that.
According to the number that I see, the number of accidents actually, things are only increased by like 2%, so it's not really a lot. And our pedestrian struck will actually decrease by like 2 from last period. The only problem that we see there is the bicycle accident. As you know, we have a lot of people using bicycle for community, for commute and delivery. We do see the increase on the bicycle accident on the, especially on the 4th Avenue. I think last day we had 10 bicycle accidents, and half of it happened on the 4th Avenue. So we do, asking our officer and the traffic officer to enforce the bicycle violation, like taking the red light, not stopping for the stop sign, and go as such as that.
And one of the other issues that we see is that in front of the schools, like the school that's right across the street from the precinct, or the school that's on 43rd, the bicycles are flying by as the kids are coming out of school. And that's something else that we're having issues with in the community. So I just wanted to address that also.
Definitely, I have my patrol officer and also my traffic officer to be station themselves at that school location at this dismissal period and observe these violators, and we were able to correct them and issue the summons, and hopefully they will change their behavior from now on.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Just remember that when it comes to e-bikes, we do see them, what we believe to be a high rate of speed. They can go up to 35 miles an hour, and it's still legal within the city. And if they're in the bike lane at that speed, they're pretty much legally going down the speed. The only thing we would be looking at is if they were reckless, in the sense of somebody's crossing and they fail to stop, or they eat the red light while people are crossing, or they're going in between, like being reckless and riding in between the pedestrians. That would be something we can enforce. But if there's no pedestrians at the time,
Right.
they're coming down and it's a green light and they're doing 30 miles an hour. We don't even have a radar like we use with the vehicles to actually tell if they're going at a higher rate of speed than 35 or 30 miles an hour. So it would have to be that we see something where they do what we would call a DTL violation, which is a red light, riding recklessly, which is going in between pedestrians or almost hitting pedestrians, something to that effect. We're able to issue the summons. We're also able to issue what we would call an oath summons and confiscate the bike for that period. And then they would always have the option of picking up the bike once they paid the oath summons off. But it would have to be a violation of that nature for us to actually take enforcement action. What we would definitely, and I would have my executive officer do, is have the officers go out and stand post and do an educational handout of flyers. But we see a lot of the delivery guys seem to be some of the offenders when they're taking the red lights on the e-bikes. So we've addressed on 5th Avenue, we had an operation done last week by my traffic sergeant, Sergeant Wu. So we will do some operations around the schools, and we will also have the youth officers conduct operations around the schools regarding that.
I have Maria Roca next. Maria, you could unmute yourself. Maria Roca? Maria, you could unmute yourself. Going once, twice. Guess she's not there. I have no additional hands, Cynthia.
Okay, I did want to bring something up that Maria did bring up at the general meeting about the congregation that happens in Sunset Park, the park itself, not the community, but Sunset Park. There was some issues last year, and it was noted that now as the weather is getting warmer, some of those individuals are back out again with the drinking. And I know last year it was a concern over the summer, and I'm just wondering what preventive measures is the 7-2 taking?
Well, actually, we are always around the Sunset Park area. If we see the violations, we're going to take action on them. Again, just being in the park is not against the law. We cannot enforce if they're just sitting there in the park. If they are drinking and they're properly ID'd, we're issuing them summonses. If they have warrants, then they would get arrested and brought back to the precinct. But unless they're in the child area where the playground area is at, that is an actual violation also. We can issue summonses for that. But we try to maintain by making contact with them. And again, offering them services through breaking ground is another option that we can use. But if they're not committing any violations and they're just sitting around, as far as them using the park, they have a right to use the park also. But we do enforce the alcohol if it's in the park, and even we always are looking for the smoking. Smoking is prohibited in the park also.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns? Well, I want to thank the 7-2 for coming out. Thank you, Deputy Inspector. Does Maria have her hand up? I think she put it back up, Jeremy. Went up then down.
Went up and down twice. It's not up now.
I just want to make sure everybody's questions were answered. Well, I want to thank you. Just going to follow up with you on getting some statistics. And just to reiterate, if for 311, if anyone sees a call that there is no response, but says there was a response, but you didn't see it, please reach out to the 7-2. That's something that Deputy Inspector said should not be happening, or 311 calls should be responded to. You may not like the response, but they will be responded to because not everything is necessarily summons. So, but if no one responds and it does say that there was a response, please reach out because they will follow up immediately with that. And then we will work on some of the other issues, and I will follow up with you getting the specific statistics to the breakdown of the 311 calls as well as the current comp stat. I want to thank you and the community officers, as well as your EXO officer for joining us, as well as Mr. Watkins and Sarah from the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. We appreciate the clarity on some of the things that are happening, and we look forward to having continuous conversations about the safety and how we as a community could work together to ensure that we are all safe.
Cynthia, I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone else on the call. As always, the public safety is paramount to us in the 72nd Precinct and the Police Department. We work relentlessly. Even though we're seeing a spike in crime in the 72nd Precinct, it's something of concern to us, and our officers are out there, and our first course of action is prevention and deterrence, but we also welcome the community to be part of this. We have an auxiliary program that anyone who wants to join and help us out, it takes the community to keep it safe. It's not just the police officers, and engage. I always tell my officers to engage with the community, speak to them, let them know what's going on. I have an open door policy. Anyone wants to come to the precinct and speak to me one-on-one, I speak to any community member. My doors are always open, and my phone number is public. So if you want to call me, I've spoken to Cynthia, Jeremy many times. Give me a call. If something is concerning you, I want to hear about it because that's what we're here for. But it takes us all to keep the community safe, and You know, if you see something, say something. If someone needs help, dial 911, get us over there as quickly as possible. We will go over there and address, but we service the entire community, not just one fraction of the community. We service everyone.
And I would also like to encourage everyone to attend the Build the Block meetings, right? So those smaller, I know we didn't get into that, but those smaller sector meetings really address issues in particular sections of the community. They meet all the time. They continue meeting through the pandemic. And those NCO officers are really helpful in establishing relationships. You could email them, you could call them, and always get in touch with them. So we will send out the link to the calendar of those meetings, and it does tell you what your sector is. In case you don't know it, you just type in your address and it will pop it up. You could also call the community board or the precinct and they will tell you your sector as well. I think there's one coming up, right?
Yes.
Sector Charlie should have one coming up. We'll be posted on social media, but
Yeah,
Sector
they
Charlie has one
posted
coming
on
up.
Twitter and.
Yeah, it's also posted, but we'll send out that information because I believe one is coming up. But it's really important for everyone to get involved. I want to thank everyone on the community board for joining and their questions. And, you know, the relationship that we have, we want to build transparency. Deputy Inspector, I know we asked a lot of questions. We asked for a lot of statistics, but we want to make sure that we're all working together to resolve things and that there's transparency as to what's happening at the 72nd. We're fortunate that we don't have a lot of the bigger issues that other precincts have, but we want to make sure that our little issues don't spiral into bigger issues. And I think that's what a lot of people were alluding to. So thank you. I look forward to following up with you on getting some of the statistics so that we could report them out. And thank you all for your service.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, 7-2.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, Jeremy, the meeting, we could officially adjourn. Everyone
you.
have a great evening. Thank you, Jeremy, for always arranging it, and Natasha. Bye all.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Cynthia.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Elvis.